So welcome to Be Creative, Be Free. From the world-renowned to the neighbor next door, we feature individuals living their creative truths with the goal to inspire and educate our audience towards creativity in themselves. And so I'd like to welcome a world-class theater performer, character actor, voiceover artist, illustrator, my dear friend Jason Simon. So good to have you here.
Glad to be here, brother.
Tell me what you like to do creatively.
I have come up with the phrase recently that I'm a jote, a J-O-A-T, jack of all trades. So it's although I do admit that my favorite thing is that most people forget the second half of that line, which is, a jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one.
I hear you. Yeah.
But no, I do a little bit of everything. My main pursuits, of course, are acting, both in TV, film, and theater, and voiceover work, like you said, and illustration and graphic design. So
all kinds of pursuits. Can you tell me a little bit about kind of growing up as a kid? Were you into all kinds of different creative things as a kid?
I mean, I always enjoyed coloring. I always enjoyed, drawing as a kid. I loved Legos. Like Legos were that thing where you're like, oh yes, this is super cool. Even my cousins used to make fun of me because I would take my G.I. Joes and I would take them apart, make new characters out of like old G.I. Joes and stuff like that. So, I kind of always did stuff, but it wasn't until like high school that I got into like actual performing.
Did you have a lot of time as a kid?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a lot different now for kids now than it was, back when we were young, where almost half the time all you had was time, to just make up stuff and do your own thing and use your imagination, because there weren't screens. And if it wasn't a set thing on TV that you had to watch at that exact half hour, you really weren't watching stuff. You were just
making up stuff and creating things.
And getting out of your parents' hair. Like, no, you can't be in the kitchen right now. So go find something to do. You shouldn't be bored. So I remember a lot of that when when we were younger,
Yeah, I mean, I'd go outside and play with toys, play with figures, create stories in my own mind. I did that with friends all the time.
Yeah, and I mean, my family moved quite a bit when I was younger, and so like we started in Seattle and the Washington area, and then we moved down to Southern California, and so you end up having to make friends or make entertain yourself because you don't have very many friends. I always drew, but I didn't really get into drawing until I was in like 7th grade, and we had moved from one part of Southern California to another, and we thought we were doing me a favor by moving after 6th grade, because then you go into junior high and everyone's new, except we moved into an area that had a middle school. So it was like, ta-da, everyone already knows each other. Okay. But it was one day in class, I remember I was drawing a picture of Batman because I liked comic books, and I drew a picture of Batman, and the kid next to me went, hey, that's pretty good, man. That's, and that's kind of what, like, oh, that's something that people like. Okay, great. Let's go play with that.
Yeah, that moment, right?
Yeah, that kernel that kind of goes, oh, you can do that. You're somewhat good at this, so
right.
You should develop it. Which I think is what happens to so many of us as kids is that you are interested in a lot of things, but then someone, be it a schoolmate, a friend, a parent, an adult in your life in some way, shape, or form, goes, hey, that's good. And you go, it is? Oh, that's a way to get attention? Okay, great. Let's do more in that area, especially when you're younger. If it's someone that you think is cool, like that you look up to in some way, shape, or form, if they admire you for something, for a heartbeat, you're like, this is something to, go forward with. So
yeah. So around junior high, you started drawing. Did you pursue classes or any kind of training?
It was the thing that I kind of just did, and then found myself copying a lot of the comic books that I had. I remember that year asking for Christmas and getting they came out with a book back in the late 80s, early 90s called How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. And it was a really and so like I got that, and I just remember being so excited because, oh my gosh, like he talks about force perspective and talks about finding the pose that is like, you know, if you were to watch this thing be animated going from here to here, there's like 75 drawings. But
Right.
in a comic book, you want like the one where there's the wind up and the one where he's fully exploded. You only get two. So it was like, oh, okay. So all of that thought, and which of course, you know, I was a weird kid that loved, you know, cartoons and comic books, and was always doing, you know, weird little voices to entertain my younger siblings and things like that. Like the voice of like Gurgi from like the Black Cauldron. You know, like little stupid things that made my sisters just die with laughter. It was like, okay, there we go. I often joke that when I was younger, my brain latched onto like little phrases. So things like Mary Poppins saying, if you make it fun, it's not work anymore. Like, that's great. And we were actually just talking about this. My father recently passed away, and you know, ripe old age of 86. He was, you know, but when I was younger, he always left for work very early in the day, and he left a little note for me one morning after my mom was being like, you're getting older, you need to start thinking about getting a job, you know, especially if you're not really going to go away to college, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And he was fond of big sayings. He was fond of, you know, like Sun Tzu and the Art of War, and like Confucius, and very super well-read individual. And he left a saying on my nightstand that said, Confucius says, if you find a job you love, you'll never work a day in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of took that to heart in kind of like everything that I did. So like even when I was waiting on tables, I did my best to like have a good time, you know, because then it makes the time go by quicker. It makes everything, you know, have a lot more energy and easier to do.
My grandfather told me that same thing. He was like, if you find something that you love, you know, you'll never work a day in your life. And it was like, to your point, when you take it and you just kind of live that way, you've got this perspective around you, like, okay, whatever I'm going to do, I'm going to do 100%, and hopefully it's something I enjoy, and then hopefully I can make something out of that I will continue to enjoy. It's probably all these little micro moments that have gotten you there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's so funny looking back, because you think about like, if this didn't happen, then this wouldn't have happened. Like the chain of events that has to happen for someone to get to where they are in their life is often amazing. And if you truly wrote down every single little thing, you would say that's not possible, you know, to happen. No, it doesn't happen like that.
Right. I just finished the audiobook from Arnold Schwarzenegger. He just did one on the 7 tools or things he thinks about in his life. And he always said, I really hate it when people say I'm self-made. I'm a self-made man. Even though I came from like this little place in Austria, this little house without any kind of running water, electricity. It's always a village.
Yeah. Whether you admit it or not is a different story. But sometimes I feel like that's one of those things where like, and sometimes it's even the things that some people don't do, you know, that like are the catalyst for you to like go further. You know, when we were younger, we were both in the Young Americans, and I think about like our summer in Boyne. Like I wasn't supposed to be there.
Really?
I went to Bill. I said, whatever I have to do, put me in. He was like, let me talk with Sean and we'll see. So then he went and talked with Sean, and the two of them came back. They're like, yes, we're going to let you come up as the assistant company manager. And I was like, okay, great. And then a week later, one of the kids that had been cast had gotten in trouble on his school trip. And because of that, then he was no longer going to be able to come up and do Boyne. And so Bill came to me and said, well, apparently it is your summer, because I'm going to put you in his spot.
Well, and even before that moment that you said, hey, I need to be here. You know, a lot of people would just go, okay, well, next year, you know.
Yeah. And I don't know what it was, but I will say that summer sparked something that really triggered a lot for the rest of my life and the building of my career. And I always wanted to be able to sing something serious. And I remember talking to Bill and being like, so do I just suck at being serious? He's like, no, he's like, Jason. He goes, look at your entire cast. He's like, everyone in your cast can pull off a ballad. He's like, everyone. He's like, that's not normal. He goes, I didn't realize how much I needed you until I needed you in this show. And I went, what? And he goes, being funny isn't easy. He's like, you think it is because for some reason it comes easy to you. He's like, but that's not the case for most people. He's like, most people, they have to work really hard at it. And when you're trying to be funny, working shows. The important thing for you to remember is that, like, right now you are fighting against your type. And he goes, but the problem is you didn't know that was your type.
Right.
You need to learn that. And I remember going back to, like, you know, Sun Tzu and the Art of War, and know your enemy like you know yourself. And if you want to fight against your type, you have to learn exactly what your type is, and you have to delve into it head first. And so that's what I really started doing. That's what you do at that stage in your life. You go to your comfort zone. And my comfort zone was comedy. And it was a great lesson early on in the entertainment business of just because you can do something doesn't mean that people are going to let you do something, because they're going to look at you one way. Or if you can do 5 things and they've got people that can do 3 of those things, they're going to rely on you for those 2 things. Even though what you may really want to do is one of those 3 other things, they're going to go, I need you for this because this is where you fit in the grand puzzle of things, which is basically what Bill was saying. He's like, no, I know you can sing a ballad. I don't need you for a ballad.
And that still carries on. I hear you. In my younger days, it'd be like, oh, I want to do this. And they're like, no, we don't want that. And first you internalize it as, oh, maybe I'm not good at that. Maybe I shouldn't. But it's also not really about that. It's about what they need. I've really kind of continued that mantra. A client or a company or a partner or whoever, don't internalize things. Don't make them personal for yourself. It's not about you.
It's, at the end of the day, it's what they need that they're coming to you for. Our business deals in a lot of rejection. And I use it in a very loose sense of the term, because the truth of the matter is that you're not being rejected. They're not saying no to you most of the time. They're just not choosing you. Right. And there's a big difference. There's a big difference in having someone say, no, you suck, we don't want you, versus, oh, this is what we need more.
Right.
You know, every time you pick up a hammer, it doesn't mean your wrench is worth any less. It just means it's not the right tool for the job. It's not what you need in that moment, you know?
Right.
So trying to remember that, you know, talking to a friend recently about some auditions, and they were asking for advice on a song to sing. And they were like, what should I sing for this? And I said, well, what do you know? And they were like, well, no, I can learn something. I can learn something, you know, whatever I need to learn. And I'm like, well, no. What do you know? And they're like, well, that's not what I'm asking you about. And I'm like, well, I know that's what I'm asking you, because the truth of the matter is that every single time you go in and audition, your job isn't to say, hey, look at me, I can do this part. Your job is to say, hey, look, this is who I am. So that they go, oh, and they figure out where you fit. Because there's been plenty of times where you go in and you may think that you are the perfect thing for this part, you know? And so you go and you're like, and you aim everything in the world towards that. And somebody sees something in you and likes something about you and says, you know what, can you try this? And you go, I would never do that, but yeah, sure. Okay. And you're amazing at it because they saw that. So if you go in pitching for, like, I am only going to go in and play Elphaba if I go in for Wicked, and they look at you and go, well, thank you very much, you know, versus if you go in and say, this is who I am, and they're like, you know what, you would be amazing as this part, you know, it's like, it's better for everyone in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, how did you get into theater?
It was off a bet.
Really?
Yeah. It was halfway through my sophomore year, and you know how back in the day you'd have homeroom, and that's when, like, the announcements would happen and stuff like that. And so I was in my homeroom class, and I literally was, like, doodling on a piece of paper, and for the first time ever, I remembered overhearing them say something about auditions for a set of plays. And I went, huh, that sounds cool. And the kid next to me went, yeah, right, Simon, like you'd ever do that. And I'm like, I might. And he was like, I bet you $20 you don't do it. And I'm like, fine, you're on. And because I owe him $20 now. uh, and I went to the auditions that night, and because it was it's after school, because it's a school type of thing, and I literally walked up to the drama room and I grabbed the door and I didn't turn the knob, and I chickened out, and I rode my bike home, and I was like cursing myself the whole time, being like, you should have just done it. Wait, ooh, so mad at myself. The next day they were having the like callbacks and another set of auditions and stuff, but I was supposed to go to the banquet for the Key Club because as an artist person, I did the posters for the Key Club that year. And so, but luckily my limb of the phone tree had just kind of fallen off. So I didn't get the message that they'd moved up the meeting time at the school by half an hour. So
wow.
I show up to the school, no one's there. I'm hanging out. And I'm like, okay, great. And so I start walking back to my bike. And to walk back to my bike, I had to pass the drama room. And all of a sudden, one of the guys that's auditioning was in my German class. And he's like, what are you doing here, man? And I was like, oh, I was supposed to go to this stupid banquet, but nobody showed up. And he goes, he's like, oh, man, that sucks. And I was like, what are you doing? And he's like, auditioning for the play. And I was like, oh, yeah, I thought about doing that. And he's like, you should. And I'm like, nah, I could. And he's like, do you have a piece of paper? And I'm like, yeah. And he takes a piece of paper and he goes, here, write this. And I write it. And he goes, I'm like, okay. And he goes, now when the door opens up, she's like, just walk in and give it to the guy behind the table. And I'm like, what? And the door opens up and he just kind of pushes me and he goes, go, go, go. And I walk in and I felt like Ralphie in, A Christmas Story, where he puts it on the desk and stands there awkwardly. and the guy's like, oh, okay, you can go back out now. And I'm like, okay. And I walk out and he's like, he's like, great. And I'm like, what did I just do? And he goes, you signed up to audition. And I was like, what? I don't know what I'm doing. He goes, it's fine. And of course, I'm sure that my audition was awful. I'm sure it sucked. We were supposed to do a student written play, and that, because it involved drugs and sexuality and stuff, had the kibosh put down on that. And they ended up doing the 15-minute Hamlet, which is technically the Hamlet in 13 minutes with a 2-minute reprise, because it was a series of one-act plays. And in between the one acts was a band that was playing. And one of the days during the show, this is how everything just kind of snowballs, like I rehearsed, I did everything I was supposed to. And I had very small part in the show, and a girl dropped out of the show. And she was supposed to be playing the queen. And so all of a sudden the director pulls me aside and says, hey, so we're going to cut your one line from this character that you do, and now you're going to play the queen as well as your other two characters. And I was like, wait, what? So I ended up having that to do. And then I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And one night while we were waiting for the show to start, one of the guys in the band had his guitar out, and we all started just all hanging out singing. And all of a sudden, by the end of the song, it was just me, the guy playing guitar, and this girl, Allegra. And Allegra looks at me and goes, Jason, you've got a really nice voice. You should audition for the choir. And I was like, nah, I don't know. And she goes, no, they're having auditions tomorrow at lunch. I'll sign you up. Oh, okay. So literally walked into the choir room the next day at lunch, and Mr. Odie, the choir teacher, was there, and he's like, well, where's your sheet music? And I'm like, my what? And he goes, oh, never mind. And made me sing Happy Birthday and the Star Spangled Banner. And was like, okay, thank you very much. And I'm like, okay, great. And I left. And then 2 days later, he shows up to my German class, and I've got I'm literally sitting amidst 5 people that are all in the madrigal ensemble, the elite choir. So they all start to stand up, assuming it's for one of them. And all of a sudden my name gets called and I step outside and he goes, well, you need to get, your parents to work the sponsors and stuff because we're going to go to Disney World this year for a competition. And I was like, okay, great. Come back in, not thinking anything of it. And Brian, the guy who got me into the audition in the first place for the play, was like, what's happened? What are you saying? And he's like, oh, I guess I'm going to do choir next year. And he goes, what? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, well, really? And I'm like, yeah. And I said something, madrigal choir or something. And he goes, you made it into madrigals, which was like the elite choir. And I'm like, yeah, apparently, And same reaction that my mom had. I was like, I brought her, she had to sign the permission slip and everything. And she's like, wait, you sing? And I'm like, yeah, I guess I do pretty good,
Yeah. It's awesome.
But it was just snowball,
Yeah.
My dad used to say that there's your question in life is often more important, and he goes, because that's what you're going to find the answer to. And he goes, he's like, if you study light and ask if it's going to behave as a ray, it'll say, yes, I will behave as a ray. If you ask if it's going to behave as a particle, it will say, yes, I behave as a particle. And you're like, those two things don't line up. They don't make sense. He goes, but that's what happens. He's like, the same thing in life. He's like, if you try to figure out why you should do something, you'll come up with a list of reasons why you shouldn't do something. And he goes, if you figure why not do something, you're going to come up with all the reasons you should go do it. He's like, so figure out what your question is. And he's like, and go. And so the number of times that I ended up where I'm at in my life, because just early on in my life being like, why not?
That's awesome. That's such great advice. That's such great fatherly advice too.
Yeah, my dad was brilliant. I give him a lot of credit.
Did you know? I don't know if you know this, but when I auditioned, I had no idea what that was gonna be, like what that was gonna be like.
Me either.
And I walked in, and they were like, "All right, what do you have prepared to sing?" And I was like, "Okay," and I just made up a song. Totally made up a melody. Boom. I was kind of in a range that I could sing, I guess, and it worked out. It was like they didn't know the song, so I guess they accepted it. They were like, "Okay, he's got some pitch. I guess he can sing some notes." But that was it. It was the whole like, "Okay, well,
sure, why not?
Let's give it a shot."
Yeah,
so true. So many things open that way, or can.
Yeah.
Because we spent time together during that time, and then everybody kind of like went their ways. Where did you go from there?
When I left the group, I ended up in LA, and I was auditioning my butt off up there. But the problem was that I wasn't auditioning for TV and film. I was still trying to do theater. There's an odd thing that happens when you're built like me, and even I'm a big dude, but and I was at least a little bit more slender back then. But I remember auditioning for a play in LA and feeling so accomplished because they had cast me in this play, and I was like, yes, I'm fine, yes. And about a week later, so like 2 weeks before rehearsal started, I got a phone call saying, hey, so we actually need to rescind our offer because the director's friend David Schwimmer wants to do the part. And this is like right before Friends like took off, so it was like he was still doing theater and stuff. And I actually lost out to 2 roles to David Schwimmer, and we're not the same type in any way, shape, or form. So it's always weird to me. But a friend of mine worked the box office for that theater and was like, oh, that's because David Schwimmer wanted to do that, right? And I was like, oh, I didn't know that. Okay, good to know. But I got very lucky because I was doing a lot of auditions and I was getting really close, and I kept getting callbacks. Like I had a streak at one point in time where over like a 3-month period of time, I did something like 45 auditions and then had like 25 callbacks, which is abnormally high amount of callbacks. Kept coming close and then kept not quite booking it. Was very fortunate. There's this amazing lady out there who is now an agent. Back in the day, she was a casting director and an accompanist and would monitor for auditions as well, by the name of Carol Weiss. And when I was on tour with Sister Act, I reconnected with her when we played LA. So she and I had a good laugh about this. But I was in my second set of callbacks for the national tour of 1776. Carol was the casting director, and she followed me out of the room and comes walking up to me. She goes, "What are you doing tomorrow at 2:00?" And I'm like, I'm working at the restaurant. She goes, "No, you're not. You're calling in sick. You're going to show up at this address, bring your book and 2 cassette tapes." And I'm like, "What?" So she's like, "Bye," and turns and walks away. And I'm like, what just happened? And so the next day I did it. I called in sick, and I drove out to this place that was her office. And I walk in, and she goes, "Give me your book." She sits down at the piano and opens my book of sheet music and proceeds to rip out every single song that I have in my book, telling me the reason why I shouldn't be singing it. "You're too young for this. You can do this in 10 years. This one is just, no, just don't ever do that one." You know, blah, 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 blah. So all of a sudden, literally, I've got one song left in my book. And she goes, "We'll save this because it's quirky." But then she reaches down, opens this drawer, and pulls out this little stack of sheet music and puts it into my binder and goes, "Tape." Puts it in the tape set player on top of the piano and goes, "Don't sing," and plays through all of these songs. And then goes, "Tape." Puts in the other one. She goes, "Don't sing," and then plays through all of the songs where she's barely playing the accompaniment but playing the melody really loud. And then she's like, "All right, now let's sing," and takes me through each song. There's 4 or 5 new songs that she's just given me, and goes, "This is what you need." She's like, "Do this. Da, 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 da. Oh, here's a funny bit you can steal. This is a good bit. Do this. Yeah, da, 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 da." And then she takes the 2 cassette tapes, puts them on top of my book, puts them on top of the piano, and goes, "Jason, you're very talented. I love you very much. But come this fall, I don't want to see you at a single audition. If I see you at any of my auditions, I'm going to kick you out." And I was like, wait, what? And she goes, she's like, "It's the opposite of what everyone else says, but you need to go east, young man. Go east." And I'm like, "Huh?" And she goes, "Everyone comes out here and they see you at the auditions and you're talented and you're funny and they like you. But they've already been to New York. They've already been to Chicago. They've already found their funny character guys in New York and Chicago. They're coming to LA to get the pretty chorus boys to fill out the rest of the show. So when you come in the room, they go, ooh, wait, maybe we have a thing here. Oh, let's check this out." But at the end of the day, they go with their first choice in New York or Chicago. So you need to go to New York. She's like, "You need to go to New York or Chicago, be the first choice rather than the ooh." She's like, "Be the first choice." And I was like, okay. And she goes, "That's it. Get out of my," sends me off, doesn't charge me a thing for it, gives me brand new sheet music, gives me a whole new coaching, and I'm going, what the heck? And I had no plans to go to the East Coast. Oddly, you know, this woman said this, and then life kind of interceded on my behalf, because I went away and I worked a summer up in Alaska in a fishery, like everybody does, you know,
Sure.
to make a bunch of money. And I came back to LA to having no place to live. You know, like the guy that I was supposed to be rooming with, you know, the girl that I introduced him to, he ran off to Vegas and got married. And so they were like, "Well, now you can't live with us because this is now our apartment." And I was like, and I, you know, they waited to tell me till the last minute. And I called all of my friends from Young Americans and everyone. And it was like, we can't, if you told me 2 weeks ago, if you told me then, that this would have been great. But so then I ended up having to put my tail between my legs and call my parents and be like, "Can I come stay with you guys in Boston for a while to get back on my feet?" And they were like, "Yeah." And I did. And once I got there, it was kind of like, it took me a while to figure out the East Coast scene because it's very different than the way the West Coast works. And but I literally, you know, spent 2 years in New England bouncing around 4 or 5 different theaters where I didn't stop working. I just show after show after show after show after show. And then I went to New York to like find a place to live. I was like,
Yeah.
And on that trip, I was out there for like a week and a half, and I auditioned for 3 shows, and I booked the national tour of Funny Girl. And when they called me, I was like,
Wow.
I don't have a place to live yet. And they're like, that's fine. We'll put you up in a hotel. So went out on that tour and met one of my best friends, and then literally was fortunate enough that basically for the next 10 years of my career, I didn't go longer than a month and a half in between gigs. And I'd come back home from a gig, I'd get done, I'd go hit a bunch of auditions over like 2 or 3 weeks. I'd book my next show, and then I'd go and visit my parents in Boston for a week, and then I'd go and do the show, And that's basically how my life went for the next like 10 years, including, tours and different things like that. So,
oh my God, that's amazing.
I know I was very lucky, but it was one of those things that everything just kind of happened the right way.
Carol knew what she was talking about. She knew what was up.
Yeah. She was like, "See, I told you I was smart." When I saw her in LA, she's like, "I know, I told you I was smart."
You consistently worked for 10 years, so clearly a lot of shows. Kind of feel like a nomad for 10 years.
The joke back in the day was that you moved to New York so that you could audition for all the jobs that were far away from New York, so that then eventually you had a resume that said you could work in New York. Literally, I'd go back to New York and I would audition for a couple of weeks, and I would book a show in Florida. And so then I'd go to Florida for a couple of months, and I'd come back, and then I'd book a show in Pennsylvania. Then I'd come back and I'd book a show in Minnesota. Then I'd come back and I'd book a tour. And so then I'd go on tour for a year, and then I'd come back, So, and in there I did, I went straight from Funny Girl back into a New England theater that I had just worked at the previous summer, and then back out on the road with the Scarlet Pimpernel, and then auditioned for a bunch of other shows, and ended up doing the national tour of Cats, Sister Act, started my own theater company as well.
Wow.
With my buddy Dexter, who I was on tour with Scarlet Pimpernel. It was his brainchild, and we were sitting on the bus one day, and he's like, I'm thinking about starting a theater company. I'm like, I'm in. Anything you want me to do except for deal with money. I said, I don't want to do anything with the money. I said, because that always makes things messy. And I said, other than that, anything you need. And he goes, all right, let's do this. And we did. I'm no longer involved with it, but it's still going now, so it's kind of a crazy thing. So
what is it called? What was the
Festival 56? It's based out in Illinois, where Dexter was from.
So you'd also then produce shows as well. You guys would do like your own.
Yeah, and so we would do a summer season that initially started out with 5 shows, because we had an outdoor venue where we would do a Shakespeare in the Park all summer that ran all summer, and then we had 2 other venues, like a 750 seat house where we would do like the big musicals and things like that, and we had a 110 seat house where we would do like the little more intimate plays. Like our first season was Midsummer Night's Dream, Anything Goes, and Of Mice and Men, and then Pirates of Penzance opposite The Curious Savage. Wow. It was great.
Did that help you as far as being a performer? I would imagine it would. Or seeing the other roles, playing the other roles.
Well, yeah, but I mean, even to that extent, I go back to like the Young Americans in that sense, because when we would tour in the Young Americans, you were the crew.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that gave me a insight into how much work the crew does, and an appreciation that is not always present in some younger performers at times.
Yeah.
I've watched some younger performers behave quite badly when it comes to treatment of like the crew around them, which is kind of sad. I feel like we got that insight into how much effort and what goes into really putting a show up, so that then years later, here I was in this situation, and where it was, again, I was the jack of all trades. So if there was a gap in what we needed, I was the one who would fill it. Because if I didn't know how to do it, I knew people that did. And so I could get a hold of it and figure it out, So that ended up being a great thing for our little brain trust.
Understanding, appreciating everybody on all levels really helps you much more well-rounded person and for your craft.
Yeah.
You fill the gaps, you learn more.
Yeah.
It is a life skill. You treat everybody the same. Like if I went into the business world, the corporate world, whoever cleans the floors is the same as the CEO. And
Yeah.
I kept that in mind.
It's the same thing in what you were saying earlier, where in that same way that there's no such thing as a self-made man, that, you know, nothing happens on its own. Nothing happens in a vacuum. And the amount of people that you don't see that go into the production of literally anything, you know, anything out there, the amount of people that it took to make that thing happen is almost always 10 times more than what you think it is.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
if you're seeing 40 people on stage, that more than likely means there's 120 behind the scenes that are doing stuff to make sure that that happens. You know, if you see, you know, an artist, you know, listed that's doing a concert, they probably have a team behind them of another, you know, huge group of people. You know, it's like there's always more people that are involved. And I always like to say that, you know, everybody is a star, you know, and everybody wants to be a star, but so few people realize that your star is going to be more recognizable if it's in a constellation. So surround yourself with other good stars. Make it so that they have to find you. They look and they're like, oh my God, there's Orion. You know, like that's the thing.
Yeah, it's so true. I was watching this documentary. It was on Harrison Ford. They're saying how, oh, you know, he's got this reputation of being in everybody's business and being a little grumpy or whatever. And everybody was really talking about him on set. Said no, he approaches it as everybody that's making this movie is the same. Me, we're all the same, so I expect the same from everybody. I'm here, 100%. So let's all be 100%, and let's all do this together. Same kind of concept, right? It's like we're all in this. It's not one person, and that hopefully creates more success for everybody.
Right. Well, and again, that makes sense that would be Harrison Ford's mentality. I mean, he started out as a carpenter. You know, like he got one of his first jobs because he was putting in the door to the executive that was in charge of that.
And the attention to detail in carpentry that you have to have is important. I wonder if that is something, unless you've been doing it, unless you have the experience and trying those things and at different levels, you just don't know.
Everybody has their own reasons for being involved, you know, and I think that's, you know, that also tells you something about the person. I'm always interested in the number of people that are in this business that have never done any of the other jobs in this business. Because to me, that's you're doing a disservice to yourself. Because if you know how hard this person's job is, you know, you also know how you can make that person's job easier, which then also makes them want to help you. The rising tide lifts all boats. You know, it's like if we all work on this together, it's going to make it better for everyone. But the number of people that I've seen treat, you know, some of their crew members poorly or yell at someone for something that's 100% outside of their control, you know, and because you don't understand exactly what their job is, you don't understand that that's outside of their control. And I think that's something that's important for you to be able to know.
That's right. Having taken the time to know or to understand.
Yeah.
It comes back to what you said before too, and what your dad said, right? It's like the question becomes the answer. So take the time to understand first before you judge. Got me through a lot of things. People just want to be understood. They want to, you know, be heard and have a good day, whatever you're doing, you're working.
Yeah.
It's like, why wouldn't you just start there first? So you're doing stage, you're a theater company. I would imagine some of the theatrical work starts to work its way into voiceover work, right?
Back in the day when I lived in LA, and, you know, and I was auditioning my butt off for theater work, I was also trying to expand my skills and trying to figure out what else I wanted to do. And I had always wanted to be a voice on a cartoon. And so I studied with an amazing voiceover artist and talented teacher back then by the name of Mary Kay Bergman. She was like the official voice of Snow White. She was the official voice of Batgirl. She was Daphne on Scooby-Doo. She was all of the female characters except the little blonde girl on South Park for like the first 3.5 seasons.
Oh, wow.
And she was very encouraging with what I was offering and what I had. And after theater took off, when I would have a little bit of downtime, I would look for auditions for that type of stuff. And that's kind of what eventually led me back into it, and just getting lucky with a couple of different auditions that then introduce you to producers. Oftentimes certain studios and producers do jobs for a bunch of different companies.
Mm.
And like I did a gig for a company out here, and they really liked the work that I did, and they liked my attitude. They like like that's another thing is like having just a good outlook on life
Yeah.
helps as well with like dealing with people and them wanting to work with you again. So then all of a sudden when something pops up and they're like, hey, I know we need someone to do this. I got this guy I just worked with. He was great. I think he could not. And so all of a sudden they bring you into another job. And so then that kind of, that has its own snowball effect, which is kind of what happened to me with a lot of the voiceover stuff that I was doing.
That when you get into voiceover and you get or into character, is it similar to how you approach a character in theater on stage?
Uh, yes, but that's the focus of your tool set is different. In theater, you are acting at a distance, so everything that you're doing has to be able to project across the orchestra. It has to project out into the crowd, as to the back of the house, as they used to always say. And so there is a certain size that you have to perform at. Then you get to TV, TV and film, and it's like when the camera is this close, you
Yeah.
don't have to. A simple does the trick,
Right.
So you're using the same skill set, but the size that you have to work at is much smaller. And then the irony is that a lot of for voiceover work, if you're dealing with commercial work, the majority of commercial work is conversational. It's what we're doing right now. In an ideal world, we're talking to you about these wonderful things that you can go out and get on your own.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it, and it's very normal. It's very everyday. And then when it comes to animation or even video games, I always like to joke that video games and animation are the theater acting of voiceover, because you're now communicating with just this part of your instrument. So all of those little things that you think about with that character, whether that character has the lisp, anything that you have that you're adding into the emphasis, if they're very agitated, they have a certain rhythm and they have a certain pattern, they do a certain thing. So everything that you would think of physically to add into that character that you would be playing on stage, you're still putting into it. The difference is that your only means of conveyance is through your voice. So, but you have to remember that your instrument is still the same instrument. One of the old coaches, used to talk about the fact that every time he did the voice for Yogi Bear, his chest would puff up. Hey, boo boo, what are you gonna do? Because all of a sudden, that's where that character lived. So you're still living in the area of a character, So you're physically going to inhabit that, but now the difference is that you can't move too much because then the clothes get picked up or you bang into something, so then that's when the hard part comes in, when you're now going, I have to run, for like a lot of video games, you're doing a lot of grunts and hits and runs and things like that, where you're still standing in place. So, but you can't get too active with it because then you're gonna get screwed up with the sound and the makeup. So it's a weird thing to be in a box and being like, I'm running, yes,
Yeah.
But again, that's that imagination. That's where that other aspects of the character all come in.
It seems like you also kind of think about the rhythm of the voice, the musicality of the voice that reflects kind of the personality and the dynamic of the character.
Yeah. And to me, it's if you listen to the people around you, every single person is different. Every single person has a certain cadence. I did a lot of accent work in the voiceover world, and that's one of my favorite things to get invested in.
To me, that's That's got to be the hardest part.
See, and I think it's just a different skill set, you know.
Yeah.
It's like music. And I think if you have sort of a musical ear, it helps you to a certain degree, because every single person's voice has music to it that's inherent in the way that they speak. And that music informs you of their mood, of how what they're feeling at that time, what's going on with them, you know. Because if someone comes in and says, I need 5 sandwiches right now, they can't have any crust, we have to have this right now, okay? Versus if someone says, all right, I need like 5 sandwiches right now, no crust, right? And just 5 sandwiches right now. Like, one actually has urgency and the other one's like, my boss told me to come get 5 sandwiches, I don't care. But that inflection is there, that feeling is there, you know. It's the same thing in listening to the other languages, you know. And the way people with accents speak because of their parent language, you know. Like, you listen to an Irish person has a certain vocal quality that just kind of happens as it kind of goes up and down, and it's all around, don't worry about it too much. Versus a German person is here, and they don't like to mutter around too much. It's not too big of a deal, but don't worry, we're going to get short, my friend. There's these little things that happen that influence what you're getting out of that person. And I feel like that's the same thing in, you know, physically. One of those things that I do, I like to be involved in like the costume process of my characters, because like a certain hat or a certain pair of shoes, you know, a certain vest or a certain shirt is going to affect the way you're able to move. It's going to affect how you feel. If this person wears their shirt untucked, it tells you something about them. So finding each of those little things to add the layers into what it is that you're doing, so that you know that you can build the character out, you know.
I have that to a degree where you're meeting some clients or some executives or whoever else is involved in the project, already pick up on and already understand a lot of what's going on by how they speak, how they talk.
Yeah. 2 people can be at the front of a room or at the head of a table speaking to a group of people, and literally just closing your eyes and listening to their voice, you can figure out which one of them thinks they're in charge and which one is actually in charge.
Yes, 100%. Yeah,
it's one of those things where it's present in everything. You're like, oh, so you're the one doing all the talking right now, but that's the person who's really in charge, and that's the person I need to impress. And that's right. You know,
and they usually don't have to talk that much because they know they're in charge.
Exactly.
One of the very first things when kind of approaching sound design and creating soundscapes, utilizing meditation or those kinds of things where you just take in the world outside of yourself,
right?
And you learn a whole lot, right? Or just by like I said, just by listening. But I'm sure, like you said, that's a lot of what you're doing too. You're picking up on patterns.
Speaking of sound design, a sound editor that I worked with on one of the movies, we were just, you know, at the wrap party, and we were talking about stuff, and he said you can often tell the quality of a movie by what you don't hear.
Yep.
And how he's like, as sound people, half your job is to get rid of all of the other noise so that you can understand the people talking in the thing. He's like, and then he's like, as a sound designer, then your job is to put back everything else, you know, so that it sounds normal.
That's right.
So that you don't, because otherwise, he's like, people feel uncomfortable and they don't know why. They don't have the tools to know, oh, we're outside, but we don't hear wind, and we don't hear crickets, and we don't hear nature. We just hear these 2 people talking, and that's weird, you know?
Right.
And he goes, but he's like, that's where you know the difference in like the quality of a production crew.
Totally true. You're not breaking the illusion because you've actually created the world properly.
Yes.
We get kind of overblown with a lot of, you know, trailer, tons of sound all the time. And if you want people emotionally involved or invested, it's those movies that have that dynamic that they're building into that to really supplement and support what's happening in the narrative. People can't really hear more than like 3 different distinct things at a time. You can tell when those movies are like wall of sound, but I'm really only hearing like a little smidge. So quality, taking the ear through it, and same with music too.
Think about how invested people get when you're watching like a war movie, And all of a sudden, and you hear all the noise and the guns going off and the explosions, and all of a sudden something happens. And the thing that the sound engineer does is they get rid of every other sound.
Yep.
Except for the guy who's just been shot in his breath.
Right.
Because now you know that's the thing we want you to pay attention to. That's what's in trouble in this moment. And you watch him go. And then as soon as he's okay, the rest of the sound comes back. But it's one of those little things that is just there to be like, come with us, focus. Okay, yeah. You're with us? Great. Let's go. Let's keep going.
Exactly. Leading the audience through the story. You've got a lot of experience now when you go on stage. So when you go on stage now, what does that feel like? Do you kind of get in like a flow state? Do you get lost in a character? Do you kind of go on stage and you kind of come off stage like, whoa, what just happened? Or are you in the moment when you're there? Like, how does that work? Because you have to memorize things. You have to be in the moment at the same time.
It depends on the piece. Because my comfort zone is comedy. I feel I'm very loose and I feel great in those type of situations, and it's very easy for me to be for like if you and I were doing a show together, I don't have an issue with you and I talking all the way up until the moment that we are about to walk on stage. A lot of performers where it's like, I can't, I have to build my world that I'm about to walk into. Whereas my world's already built. And as long as I'm comfortable there, I can go in and out of it. With comedy is easier. In dramas, there's aspects of it where I played Lenny in Of Mice and Men. Mm-hmm. And Lenny is such a different reality, right, from what we live in normally, and from what with his capacity to think and his capacity to take in information is so different than mine that for me it helped shutting down a lot of things, so that way during the run of the show for the most part I was Lenny. You know, like I might have like a moment or two backstage where I got to like talk to someone and be Jason for a heartbeat. But for the most part, it was like you're coming off stage and you're walking around to this entrance, holding for 2 beats and then coming back in, you know? So with that type of character, for me at least, that was the type of character where I was just living in that space. In comedy and in improv, you get quick. There's a lot of moments that happen in shows where I'm paying attention to everything that's going on enough where I can walk into a scene and make it a part of my scene to fix something that needed to be, you know, in the right place for the next person who's going to come in, you know, or like in Scarlet Pimpernel walking through and grabbing a knife out of a wall because it shouldn't be there anymore. You know, little things that you try to fix on the fly. Now, imagine you're in a scene with 2 other actors, and mentally there's that part of your brain that, as like a fixer, as an actor who fixes things, you're going, ooh, this, and you're thinking of like, you've thought of 12 different ways to fix what's happening. But because you're on stage in front of an audience and your character wouldn't do that, and your character doesn't have, like, there were times where something happened with one of the older actors in Of Mice and Men, but as Lenny, I couldn't help the other 2 actors in that scene because Lenny wouldn't say anything, you know? Right. So there's moments where that can be a little bit of a torture for yourself, but for the most part, that's one of the best examples I can give of just like, you know, living in that space where all of a sudden you're here, and it doesn't matter because not, you know, like your focus is on this, on the textile, on I need something to pet, I need something to rub, I'm focused on these little things that are this and this, but to me they're big things. I feel like any acting really is about your focus. It's about, you know, where you're putting that, what it's coming from, what is your purpose in that scene has everything to do with what it is that your character focuses on. In productions where someone doesn't have that type of experience, what they're trying to figure out is, what is my focus in this moment? Because you haven't given that to me as a director, or it's not spelled out for me in the script.
Okay, you don't have to focus, but you're still on stage. So this is who we're paying attention to. And I think that's a huge one in life, right? I use that in life.
Yeah.
You walk in the room or you're in a meeting or you're talking about whatever, who are we focusing on? And that's huge.
And to me, that's another one of those things where I feel like there's not a lot of people that were taught how to help the audience.
Right.
Which is what I was always told that was what that was about. Was the reason why you're focusing over there is because if there's 10 people in the audience and 10 people on stage, that means at least one person is looking at you. And you need to tell them, no, the story's over there. So look over there.
Mm-hmm. How do you keep your voice intact? I'm sure you've done long runs of things.
It's such an individual thing, because everybody is built differently. And I think that's the most important thing to recognize early on in whatever you're doing, is that there are things that I can do that I can get away with doing 8 times a week with my voice that someone else can't. Now, also, that person might be a gymnast and they can get away with doing a double handspring into a back flip every single night. And you're never going to see my 6'3" butt doing that, So, but I feel like that's the important thing is figuring out what it is that works for you. And the hardest part for me has been the fact that when you get into the groove of a show in particular, and then you have to audition for something else. And I've got a large vocal range. I sing roles that are tenors. I've sung roles that are sopranos. I've sung roles that are, that are basses, and everything in between. So it's one of those weird things where the number of times where I got an audition for a show that I probably could have gotten had I not been working at the time. I got called in for, to cover Uncle Fester on Broadway.
Yeah.
And Uncle Fester is, da 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 da, just the moon and me, very na 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 na, very light, very tenory. Hi, yes, we're going to talk up here and we're going to do a lot. And then the role at the time that I was doing was the governor in Man of La Mancha, who's like, Don Quixote de la Mancha, and it's like, and I was weighted, and you can tell I just got through doing something that's lighter because I can't get down into that part of my voice as well, but it's like, so I feel like as long as I have enough time to like kind of work my way into whatever that voice is, I'll be fine. You try and keep up your flexibility and you try and sing a little bit each day, because that also helps, with your flexibility as well. And then just kind of lean into whatever it is that you're working on, ideally you try and stay nimble so that when you're in between jobs, so that whatever comes up, you can do. If you are doing Jesus Christ Superstar and you're rock screaming every single night, then there's probably going to be a portion of your voice where you just need to like rest. It's a muscle. It's like any other part of your body. You can go out and let's say you can do 100 push-ups. If you all of a sudden have to do 200 push-ups, you can do 200 push-ups. But that next day, you're probably not going to want to do any push-ups, or, but you need to like space it out, so that you're doing properly, taking care of what it is that you need to do, and investing the time in yourself to figure out how it is that you can do certain things without hurting yourself. Like the amazing Mr. Conroy, who was the voice of Batman in the animated series, talked about how when he went into the audition, he kind of scrunched down on his vocal cords and he did this thing with his voice. And after his audition and once he booked the job, he did one session where he did that same exact thing and was like, oh gosh, I need to figure out how to do this without doing that, because he was stupid tired. He's like, I'm not going to have a voice if I keep doing that. Sometimes that's a matter of, I don't know if they call it this anymore, but like going out to the woodshed, where you just take yourself to the woodshed and practice it and work on it. And so that, that like, I know I can get away with talking like this for almost hours at end, and it's not going to hurt my voice and I'm not going to worry about it. But there are people where they go, oh my God, that sounds like it hurts your voice. And I'm like, it doesn't. Some of the best trained American voices are like rock and roll singers
Uh-huh.
where, they just chose not to do opera, but they have all the technique. They know what they're doing.
How you get the fry, how you get the scrote out of it. Right?
They did that amazing version of The Sound of Silence.
Oh, yeah. Disturbed did that.
Disturbed, yeah. But like the lead singer of Disturbed has a beautiful voice.
Sure.
And the way he's got really great control over it is when you listen to The Sound of Silence and you listen to him put the distortion into his voice and take it away.
Yep. Yep.
Because he's able to hit all those notes cleanly if he wants to.
Sure.
But
yeah.
And that's the trick, is that if he wanted to sing, the sound of silence, he could. Mm-hmm. But instead he's going the sound, and he's adding all this extra little layers and texture and grit to his voice, so that when he gets into it, he can really grip and go. But he knows how to do it so he's not hurting himself.
Absolutely. I did see a thing where, when did the where did that come from? And he was like, I have no idea. One day it comes out and the band's like, what is, like, nobody was like, that's amazing the first time he did it. We're all like, not sure, dude.
What was that? Come
back to that a little bit. Iconic, right? And it's another technique to add that. You actually want to go a little lighter on your voice, on your chords, to be able to actually hit it and do that. And people think to like blow their voice out.
Yeah.
And it's actually the opposite. And it's same with like guitar playing. You actually want to think less to play faster. The more you think about it, you run into obstacles.
Yeah, well, and it's, it happens on stage all the time. I was just doing a play out in Nantucket, and one of the gals was talking about how she had that moment where she was scared because right before she went out on stage, she couldn't remember her line. I grabbed her at the time and I said, "Hey, how's it going?" And she's like, I gotta go out. And I threw her off enough, and then she went out and she's like, and I don't know why, but all of a sudden everything was there. And I said, well, I didn't do that on purpose. I said, but I do that to myself all the time. And she goes, what do you mean? And I said, well, the number of times that I'm standing backstage and I go, what is my first note? What am I supposed to sing here? And then I have to remind myself, it's in there. Right. And the problem is I'm thinking about it right now. Whereas you reach really quickly with most memorized things. You reach really quickly to the point where it's muscle memory. It's like riding a bicycle, as they say. Where the moment, if you were to try and ride a bicycle and think about riding a bicycle, it's going to go very badly. And if you just trust that it's there, and that the playwright has done their job, and the people writing the music have done their job, like everyone's done their job, it's going to be there in a reactionary way anyway, for the most part. So if you walk out on stage and just let it happen, and let it go through you, it's going to happen. The only time that was not the case was I did a feminist minimalist version of The Scarlet Letter, and it was originally written for Cynthia Nixon. That she did it in Denver. But I remember the artistic director of the theater getting kind of mad at I played Chillingworth, the girl playing Hester Prynne. They were stopping us during the tech run, and they'd be like, great, can you guys go from this line? And we'd go, no. Can we go back a little bit further? And they're like, no. And every single time they would call out a line for us to start from, we would have to go back 3 or 4 lines. One of us would have to go back 3 or 4 lines to get going, because the way the play was written was set up so that it would be like having a conversation with you. But I come out and I say this and this, and you say this and this, not responding to what I just said. You're just saying something else that is part of your thought process in this moment. Then I say something that, again, is not responding to the first 2 things that you said. And then all of a sudden you respond to what I said first. And then I respond to what you said. And then like the build of the conversations, the build of the language of the scenes was so layered and structured in such an abnormal way that if you asked to start in the middle of that, you wouldn't know what your cue line was,
Right.
because your cue was 3 lines before.
Right.
So you're like, I can't start there because I'm not responding to that. I'm responding to what she said 3 lines ago. You know, um, and we knew it. We knew it cold, but it's like, to jump into that middle was not the way either one of our brains worked. Whereas the artistic director was one of those guys where, like, if he memorized something, it was memorized, and he could start, mid sentence if you needed him to. So he got very frustrated with us, and we're like, I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you.
That's kind of anti-acting, right? In a sense, because
The odd part is that you're still reacting and you're still thinking, but I feel like the difference is that there were so many occasions where you were almost saying your thoughts out loud rather than just thinking these two things and saying what you intend to say. You actually said those two things and then started saying what you were going to say. Does that make sense?
yeah, that makes more sense. Yeah, if you couldn't perform,
Yes.
what would you do?
Well, you know what that is, because that's my other gig. That's the illustration stuff, which actually honestly stemmed out of not being able to perform.
Really?
I was playing Shrek in Shrek the Musical, and I blew out my knee, ruptured my patellar tendon, and so I was on workman's comp and a year of PT, and was stuck with my leg locked perfectly straight for 10 weeks post surgery, and then a long road of physical therapy, and basically turned to my wife and said, are you okay if I spend a bunch of money on getting an iPad Pro and an Apple Pencil so that I can sit here and draw and do things? She's like, yes, because it's going to keep you insane, which means it's going to keep me sane. So but yeah, so then I started. I'd always drawn, but it was always been like the secondary thing. It was always the side thing. And now that I had all this time where I wasn't able to physically do anything else, I started projects for myself. And I think my first thing was I did 100 days of elves. So every single day was a different elf. And then I did 100 days of pirates. During this time, I was experimenting. I was learning how to draw on the iPad, because that's a very different experience, and learning the program and stuff. And then had a friend of mine who liked the style of what I was doing be like, hey, I have a couple of kids shows that need logos, and the kid shows always have illustrations with the logos. And he goes, would you mind doing that? And so I did that, and he liked it so much and liked what I was drawing that he's like, do you think we could turn this into a book? And so we got together and we took part of his show and broke it down and turned it into a kid's book. And that was my first book, Ingredients for a Witch. And then we just kind of kept trucking from there and did another book. And that's kind of kept me going on the side.
That is cool.
But it was always there. It was always stuff that I doodled and I always drew and I always did random stuff. I just didn't have the focus to do it, professionally in any capacity.
But then it came back out. Muscle memory, worked at it. You worked at it. It's in there. And then when the time came, I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this while I'm laid up. And there you go.
Yeah. Well, and it's amazing, the old 10,000 hour rule of, like you can become an expert in anything as long as you put the time into it, and I think that's the thing that a lot of people don't understand about most of the arts is that there's a certain level of creativity that is involved that is the spark plug. But, that's the thing that puts the fire in the engine, but the skills are the engine,
Right.
That's what gets you going, is
Yeah.
that's what carries you through. So it all depends on whether or not you might be driving an RC car right now, but you can build it up and work your way up to, a semi truck if you want to.
Right. Continue to pursue all those curiosities and
Yeah.
just keep kind of like chipping away at different things, and they kind of can present themselves for monetary reasons or for pure joy.
There was a saying that I heard a long time ago that was find your like 2 favorite things to do, and make your favorite thing overall your hobby, and your second favorite thing your job. And everyone goes, wait, I thought you were supposed to take your favorite thing and make it your job. And the reason why he said this was because no matter what you do, at some point in time, your job is going to feel like a job.
Yeah.
It's even one of those things where, like, even as a performer, every once in a while you're just like, oh, I got to go to the theater, like, anything that you have to do at some point in time is going to be hard to have to do it. Any type of job is, even if you enjoy it, is going to be hard to do at some point in time. So having that escape to that other thing that you enjoy is important. Personally myself, I feel like I've got like 5 things that I've been enjoying that I've made jobs just at varying levels of success. It's part of the problem of being an adult with ADHD. It's like, yes, that looks fun, we're gonna go do that for a while.
I understand. I don't know if I have ADHD, but I've thought about it because I've got a beautiful mind wall over there with just scribbles of things that connect to things, and we'll do this and that, this and that, and it's like focus. That's been the big mantra for myself.
Well, see, I think that's different than I think that's just ideation. Like that's
I guess
that's fairly normal.
I guess, but it's just so much ideation that then you're like, where do I start? Okay,
yeah, that's
let's start here. And you're like, oh, no. And so connecting the dots and focusing and finding one more main path to start with and let everything bloom off of it. That has been my journey. What are some of your favorite shows that are out there?
It's hard. It's just hard because you like
different reasons,
different shows for different reasons. Like I loved playing Tevye. Like Tevye was just one of those dream roles, and to finally get a chance, and the gals who played my daughters were amazing. And that's one of those roles that I love that role, and I love the essence of what that story is so much that was like amazing. And then similar aspect for doing the producers, getting to play Max Bialystock and the producers. Every single show is different, even like the Wizard of Oz, which I've done 7 times, something like that. And every single time it's a different experience, even though what I'm doing is basically the same. The experience is different. The set is different. The people are different. Like everything is the essence of theater in that way, where every single night is different because the audience is different and they influence what happens as well. And every person walking into the building is different.
Sure.
God, there's a lot of really good stuff out right now. That's the hard part. It's interesting because I feel like despite how long the quote unquote jukebox musical has been around, you still have people that complain about a jukebox musical. You have people complaining about the pop influence on musical theater, but forgetting the fact that in essence the original like musicals were the pop music of their time.
Yeah.
And to discuss derivative work, I mean, half of Shakespeare's work was derivative. It was taking a story that was already well known and putting his own spin on it.
What is the essence of storytelling and creativity in the arts? And everybody thinks that it's always going to be this amazing, like never before thought of idea ever. No, it's always influenced by, and in theater and music, film, art, painting, whatever it is. It starts on it with cave drawings on walls.
To me, it's like the Ed Sheeran case that was, I think that's 2 years old now, but I love that he picked up his guitar and said, okay, if I play these 3 chords, which is what you're saying, that's this song, right? Oh, and this song. Oh, and this song. Oh, and this song. Oh, and he's like, so if you start making it so that we can't play these certain sets of chords in this way, he's like, you're eliminating so much music. And again, at the end of the day, as an artist, the most important thing you bring to anything is you, and it's very interesting to me because I over the years I've gone to a lot of different auditions, and you hear different people doing different things, and it cracks me up because the number of times that I'll hear someone do a song and I'll go, oh, that's a cool thought. Like I never would have thought of that. Oh, huh. And it makes me want to go back and explore that song or even ask them what it was. And you get some people that are so guarded about that. No, well, that's my audition song. That's
Right.
I had tons of experiences where there's 2 pieces that I do that are not that well known. because they're from very, very small shows that not a lot of people know of. And I always get the question of, so can I ask you, what that's from? And I'm like, yeah, it's this, it's from this, and here. And I'll be like, do you want to photocopy it? Like, I'll literally hand you the sheet music and let you photocopy it. Because at the end of the day, you and I can go in auditioning for the same exact part.
Mhm.
You and I are not going to have the same rendition of that part. And so any given song that you and I sing, even if it's like we're note for note like the same, it's still going to be different because of how you interpret it and how I interpret it. And it's crazy to me that people still feel the need to like hold on to something to try and block it from someone else being able to use it, when at the end of the day, the important element to that is the artist.
Yep.
Not the tools, but the artist.
Yep. Absolutely.
I think it's more recognizable in the visual arts because it's more readily available that like someone's drawing style or painting style is different.
Sure.
Than it is the fact that like singing wise, these two people, or acting wise, these two people, like Michael Gambon as, Dumbledore, all of a sudden you went, oh yeah, that's a very different Dumbledore,
Yeah. I think it's very freeing when you come around to that realization. It's really not that much of a competition where if I let them know this thing, they're going to take it. And it's still you. You still have your own flavor. Your right?
You're your own thing.
Yeah. You're your own thing. And you'll always have that. So go forth with that.
Yeah. A lot of young artists want to do what is popular.
Mm-hmm.
They want to do what is on trend. Whether it be a visual artist or whether it's a performing artist, but one of the best things that you can do is bring you to the table and do the things that you like, and the people that like it will find you. There's a gal who recently did these. I want to say I'm gonna mess this up. I want to say they're like folk singer renditions of Sondheim songs.
Mm-hmm.
And now she's found her niche as a performer because she loves musical theater, but she loves folk music, and she's bringing this completely new flavor to these songs and this completely new identity to it. So
Sure.
It's worked out really well, But again, it's because she brought her to it.
Right, exactly. And there's probably some stalwarts. They're like, that's not Sondheim,
Yep.
But we're always changing. So change is always happening. So just embrace it and enjoy it. Enjoy those new flavors. That's the one thing that's great about the internet. It's like you find any kind of.
Just be careful where you're looking for it.
What? Fair enough. Yes.
You might find a version you'd never anticipated.
Yes. Be careful of your wording in Google and your search history.
Exactly.
But it is pretty cool. We're living in cool times for sure. Is there anything you want to talk about as far as what you're doing right now?
No, I'm back in the swing of things. I just finished illustrating my fourth children's book.
Awesome.
I'm auditioning for more stuff, and just hopefully more stuff. Hopefully you see me in more stuff as it comes forward. It's like everything else in this business. You just got to keep putting yourself out there. So, and hopefully somewhere down the line, we get to collaborate on a certain project.
I would love to. It will be right. The timing will be right.
Yeah. It'll happen.
Yeah, definitely would. Well, thanks so much, friend. So good seeing you and talking with you.
My pleasure, man. It's always good talking with you.
Let's do it again.
Yes, please.
All right.